action item is finalizing the infrastructure budget facility, about which I spoke during our budget vote in May this year. That will be done by the Minister of Finance by October 2017. In many instances, when I refer to October 2017, you must keep in mind that I'm referring to things that will be elaborated in the medium-term budget policy statement. Number 2, financial sector and tax policy. There are 4 action steps to be taken there. Convene the Financial Sector Summit to quantify transformation targets, including for low-income housing and transformational agriculture, by the Minister of Finance. Timeline is December 2017. Now, you will get copies of these, so I'm sure you don't have to scribble copiously. Second action item is bringing down banking costs by implementing the Twin Peaks legislation by the Minister of Finance. Timeline is February 2018. Work with DTI on targeted debt relief for the most vulnerable, for example, in cases of reckless lending. That is by the Minister of Finance. The timeline is February 2018. And introducing microinsurance framework and review cooperatives bank framework by the Minister of Finance, February 2018. Number 3, leveraging public procurement. There are 3 action items under that. Implement the amended PPFA regulations by the Minister of Finance, July 2017, that's been done. Finalize the public procurement bill by the Minister of Finance. We expect that to be done by March 2018. The bill will now be released for public comment, and it will go through the necessary processes, taken to Parliament, to the Standing Committee on Finance, be discussed, taken to Parliament for the National Assembly for debate, second reading debate. We hope that will be done by March 2018. And thirdly, finalize complementary government fund. A complementary government fund aimed at financing SMMEs in startup phase. That is by the Minister of Small Business and Cooperatives Development. We expect that to be done by February 2018. Number 4, recapitalization of state-owned enterprises and government guarantees. There are 5 action items under that. 5.1, continue engagements on framework for the disposal of non-core assets by the Minister of Finance. Timeline is March 2018. Conduct a detailed audit of non-strategic assets of state-owned enterprises aimed at strengthening the SOE balance sheets by the Minister of Finance by March 2018. Finalize recapitalization of SAA and the South African Post Office by the Minister of Finance, August 2017. Reduce the issuance of government guarantees, especially for operational reasons. That is the responsibility of Cabinet by October 2017. You will remember in this regard that I have raised concerns that the government guarantees, we need to strategically use them, utilize them to support infrastructure investments and capital expansion, rather than to finance operations and losses and inefficiencies in the SOEs. And we must determine the consequences of SOE non-adherence to the guarantee conditions. That is the responsibility of government by October 2017. Number 5, broader SOE reforms. There are 6 action items arising under that heading. We must implement private sector participation framework by March 2018, that's the Minister of Finance. Implement the remuneration framework, the Minister of Public Enterprises, by March 2018. Finalize the board appointment framework by the Minister of Public Service and Administration by March 2018. This is quite important to establish standardization across the SOE environment, regardless of which department is a shareholder department, to ensure that we all have a common and standard understanding of the procedures for appointments of boards, as well as the term of office of board members, the standards we expect of board members, how they get appointed, how they get evaluated and assessed. We must table the draft shareholder management bill. That's the responsibility of the Minister of Public Enterprises. We expect that to be concluded by March 2018. The bill has been finalized for public comment, and it will soon be released for public comment. And then after that, it will go back to Cabinet for final approval in order to be referred to the National Assembly. Then we must implement a framework for the determination and costing of developmental mandates of state-owned enterprises. That's the responsibility of the Minister of Finance by March 2018. And we must approve the terms of reference for implementation of the Remuneration Standards Oversight Committee. That is the responsibility of Cabinet by September 2017. Action 6, private sector participation framework. We must engage other departments on PSP framework by the Minister of Finance, July 2017. We must provide broader guidance on sectors or asset classes for public sector participation and decide whether sector-specific PSP frameworks are needed. That's the responsibility of all shareholder ministries by October 2017. We must present potential projects for PSP to line departments, technical task team and interministerial committee. That is by all state-owned enterprises by November 2017. We must approve PSP projects as outlined in the governance framework proposed in the PSP framework. That is again the responsibility of all shareholder ministers, must be done by March 2018. And we must include PSP projects in shareholder compacts and corporate plan for subsequent implementation. That is the responsibility of all shareholder ministers by March 2018. Action 7, costing developmental mandates. We must consult other SOEs on costing of developmental mandates. That's the responsibility of the Minister of Finance by August 2017. We must implement mechanisms to effect outcomes through corporate plans. That is by the Minister of Finance, timeline August 2017. We must roll out the template for inclusion in the 2018 corporate plans. The Minister of Finance, September 2017. And monitor implementation through quarterly reports and annual reports and corporate plans. Minister of Finance, March 2018. Action 8. Energy. We must approach NERSA regarding ESCOM hardships That will be the responsibility of Eskom itself. Timeline is July 2017. We must develop the case for Eskom soft support until tariff adjustment in 2018 and submit to Treasury and the Eskom board. That is the responsibility of Eskom. Timeline is July 2017. We must finalize the lowest cost integrated energy plan and integrated resource plan, taking into account extensive comments received during public consultation. That is by the Minister of Energy. The timeline is February 2018. Review the pace and scale of rollout under the circumstances of Eskom hardships and overcapacity up to 2021. That is the Minister of Energy. Timeline is August 2017. And we must review the level of participation by black industrialists and develop a strategy to increase it. That is the responsibility of the Minister of Energy. Timeline is August 2017. Action 9, SAA. We must finalize the appointment of the new CEO. That is the responsibility of the Minister of Finance by July 2017. We must finalize and implement the 5-year turnaround strategy. That is the responsibility of the Minister of Finance. The timeline is December 2019. We must negotiate with lenders to extend debt to longer term. That is the responsibility of the Minister of Finance. Timeline is October 2017. Action 10. Telecommunications. There are 5 action items under that. Number 1 is to conduct a high-level study on the wholesale open access network spectrum needs, with a view to license the remainder to the industry. That is the responsibility of the Minister of Telecommunications and Public and Postal Services. Timeline is August 2017. We must issue a policy directive mandating ICASA to commence the licensing process. It is the responsibility of the Minister of Telecommunications. Timeline is December 2017. We must complete the spectrum licensing process. It is the responsibility of the Minister of Telecommunications. Timeline is December 2018. We must direct the Competition Commission to investigate the data prices. That's the responsibility of the Ministers of Telecommunications and Economic Development. The timeline is July 2017. And we must commence the rollout of Phase 1 of South Africa Connect broadband program. It is the responsibility of the Minister of Telecommunications. The timeline is August 2017. Action 11, post-bank licensing. We must implement amendments of the enabling we must amend the enabling legislation for the licensing of the post-bank. It is the responsibility of both the Ministers of Telecommunications and the Minister of Finance. Timeline is December 2017. Action 12, Minerals and Petroleum Resources Development Act Amendment Bill. We must finalize the MPRDA Amendment Bill in a manner that reflects the inputs of civil society, labor and industry solicited through the public consultation process. That is by the Minister of Mineral Resources. The timeline is December 2017. Action 13, broad-based socio-economic empowerment charter for the South African mining and minerals industry. You will know that the charter has been gazetted by the Minister of Mineral Resources. And what we say is that there must be further engagements with civil society, labor, and industry. Action 14, regulation of land holdings bill, we must table regulations, the regulation of land holdings bill in Parliament after processing by a multidisciplinary ministerial think tank, the NJSC and the NETLEC. It's the responsibility of the Minister of Rural Development and Land Reform. The timeline is 2017. It is important in relation to these 14 action points. I earlier made a mistake and said there are 13. In relation to these 14 action points, that we need to emphasize the principle of leadership, united action. During these difficult economic times, we need the unity in action and unity in purpose of all the relevant role players and leadership, particularly emanating from government, for us to be able to restore confidence in the economy and restore growth. All of these items that we have announced are drawn from the 9-point plan, and whilst they do not in themselves constitute an overarching economic recovery plan, they constitute, however, an important intervention to restore confidence, to demonstrate action, and that we have an action plan by which we as government are prepared to be held responsible. All of the ministers who have been mentioned in relation to this action plan understand the responsibility we jointly share to comply with our action plans and implement the action items, the details of which will, as you notice, be availed as the time goes on, so that we provide the necessary confidence and certainty to investors and the markets. The President will continue to play a coordinating role with regard to the implementation of these action plans. And as you know, it is important to re-emphasize that at the very heart of what we are doing in this regard is to focus on growth and transformation. And so the issues of transformation are critical to the steps we are going to take and the implementation of all these action plans. The medium-term budget policy statement will elaborate and give flesh and detail to some of these items. And the different sector departments will equally do so at the relevant times. We will be continuing to engage with business on this action plan so that they understand the steps we are taking in order to reignite growth to the economy. The National Treasury remains singularly focused on this important task at hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. We'll open the floor for questions. So I'll take the first row, then I'll move to the second row. So we'll take about 4, and then we'll have a few more rounds. So let's start in the first row.
Good morning, Minister. Karen Morn from ENCA. You've mentioned this issue of SOE management as being so pivotal to the, the economy recovering. Yet your Deputy Minister is implicated in PFMI violations with regard to PRASA in a report from your own Chief Procurement Officer. A court now finding that he signed off on a deal that was essentially blatant fronting that disadvantaged black business people. You yourself, of course, with the Gupta leak emails, there are all kinds of aspersions about your involvement in people being appointed to boards who were blatantly unqualified, and you have dealt with that in the past. But how do you deal with that credibility gap where, you yourself and the Deputy Minister are seen to be somehow involved in these kind of mismanagement of SOEs? Second of all, the Public Protector has reversed her remedial action with regard to the Reserve Bank. There have been calls for her resignation, given the kind of impact that it had on the markets and the fact that you have articulated that you are dealing with this issue of policy uncertainty. What is your attitude on whether or not she should resign on this issue? And then finally, that same Public Protector has said that she is opposing the president's bid to halt, to put a permanent, or to block the start of a state capture inquiry pending his review with regard to his constitutional prerogative to implement commissions of inquiry. Given that every time we have a press briefing, you have to answer questions about the Gupta leak emails, what is your attitude on this? Would you like to see an inquiry immediately, or are you prepared to wait for months and possibly even years while the president's court action is finalized? Thank you.
Second row, Warren.
Good morning, ministers. Warren Thompson from MoneyWeb. Minister, I just wanted to get clarity. You've given us quite a lot of information around these points to deal with the economy. What is, if we look at collectively government and the private sector's top priority in terms of the economy, what do you see that as? Is that trying to stave off the ratings downgrade? Is it to generate a certain amount of economic growth this year? Can you just give us a very succinct point around what the number one priority is? And then just to go to some of the detail that you've mentioned, I think instead of asking too many questions, I'll just stick to perhaps Eskom for the first point. You referred to soft support for the utility until there's been an adjustment in the tariff, I think. Could you just give us some idea what that means? And then you said that in respect of the mining charter, which has been very contentious, you would like to have industry and government discuss that again. As you've pointed out, it has been gazetted. So what exactly would you like to see there with the mining charter, which would go a long way to kind of strengthening that confidence between government and business that you'd like? Thank you.
I'll take one more question.
Thank you very much. It's Mariam Issa from FinWeek. Minister, that was a very encouraging and impressive set of action points that you outlined just now. I think perhaps the most striking thing about them is the timelines, the targets. However, the most overriding question of the day is, nearly every day, we see more and more evidence of high-level corruption, which is draining hundreds of billions of rand from the fiscus, which could be used to spend on infrastructure, social support. And not only are we being deprived of this money, but it's spooking investors. We're seeing some pushback on that. And it's also, no doubt, it's discouraging business. Do you really think that confidence can be restored amidst all these reports of corruption in very high-level deals? And what is your attitude towards this? Are you concerned?
Because the first three people that asked questions asked more than one, so can we just deal with those ones and then I'll come back for the other ones? Please don't be motivated by those three. Just think of them as a bad influence. Ask you one question. I'm sure other people will also ask questions that you might be thinking about. So I'll hand over to the panel to deal with those. You can do it from there. You might.
Yeah, it's fine. Thank you very much. Current, predictable questions. I'm sure whatever we have to talk about, you will ask the same questions. Until
I get answers, yeah.
until you get answers that satisfy you, not necessarily answers. Anyway, the management of our state-owned companies is quite an important issue, I think, for all of us. And I think I agree that the issues of corruption are quite, the allegations of corruption are quite an important issue that have an enormous bearing on confidence. And we all need to pay attention to the steps that we need to take in order to deal with this and remove it from our public arena. In that regard, I think the public protector has made a genuine proposal that there should be a commission of inquiry into this thing. I think it will help all of us to clear the names of those who believe they are innocent, they've been wrongfully tarnished. And so we should look forward to a speedy inquiry that will result in us knowing exactly what the issues are in regard to all of these matters. So the point that I'm making is that I fully support a commission of inquiry in this regard, as the African National Congress itself has said, and as the presidency has indicated. I think the issue for now is the modalities of how that commission will be conducted. I have no power over that matter, but all I wish for is that there should be a speedy inquiry to resolve the issues that have been put into the public domain. I certainly don't think that the public protector should resign. She was not appointed by me, she was appointed by Parliament, and I think that if Parliament wishes to make that recommendation, they should do so. I do not wish to join the chorus. I think it is only fair that the public protector should have said that if there are issues that she wishes not to contest in terms of the cases for the review of her report, then it can only be fair that she should make such a determination. And so those issues will be dealt with when the court process takes place. As I say, should there be a view in the National Assembly as the institution which appointed the public protector that she should vacate her position, then I think the National Assembly is the institution which can make that determination, certainly not me. My top priority, unfortunately in this regard, both the issues you raise are equally a top priority. To stave off any further downgrade, we need to take urgent steps. And I think what we are trying to demonstrate here is precisely that sense of urgency, an action-oriented intervention with clear timelines that bind us as to what we need to do in order to stave off any further downgrade, understanding the severe impact it will have on the economy. But secondly, to also achieve growth. I am mindful of the fact that the growth target for this year has been revised by the IMF first to 0.8 and re-revised to 1% during the Article 4 report. And I am keen that we should achieve a higher growth than we did last year as a solid platform for us to make a genuine effort towards achieving 3% growth, going up to 6% growth, and sustaining our growth levels at that high notch in order for us to fight unemployment, to fight poverty, to fight inequality. So both of those are a top priority. The issues of soft support for Eskom, the details of it are going to be unveiled as we move on. The department is working at an interim mechanism until the next tariff applications, and I think at some stage we will indicate. But what we are expressing is a deep appreciation of the weakening of the ESCOM balance sheet, that the ESCOM balance sheet is under pressure. And so there is an urgency for us to provide assistance so that they are able to continue implementing the capital build program and fulfill their mandate. So in the Department of Energy, will unveil what are the interim mechanisms that are required in this regard in order to support ESCOM until the next tariff application. With regard to the mining charter, the Minister of Energy has indicated that his doors remain open for continuous engagement around the issues which have been raised. We wish to reaffirm that, to express our wish that the parties should find one another, because the litigation process could take long, delay the implementation of even the non-controversial or the non-disputed aspects of the mining charter. But we believe that the parties should continue to engage to find one another, because restoring confidence in the mining sector is important for us. The mining sector during the first quarter was an important contributor to the growth that it was an important contributor to the better performance than the final quarter of 2016. And so both mining and agriculture are quite important at this present stage. And obviously we need to take further steps, even at the level of the CEO's initiative, to pay attention to other intervention areas such as tourism and so on, so that we can achieve a rebound in terms of economic growth. So I would be keen that the parties involved in the mining charter dispute can find one another and at an ideal level be able to resolve their issues outside court, so that we don't have a prolonged litigation process that may have an impact on investor confidence in the mining sector. The issues, I think the issues that have to do with corruption and confidence, I've responded to them. I think all of us will be the better once the Commission of Inquiry has done the investigations and investigated all of the matters that relate to corruption everywhere. Everywhere, not only in relation to state-owned companies, but also in relation to other matters of corruption, the IFMS and other matters that where there have been allegations of corruption, so that all of those who are being implicated in either in corruption or irregularity or in anything can have an opportunity to clear their names. We must be seen to be taking action, decisive and bold action, to combat corruption in South Africa. Not because we are worried about investor perception or the ratings agencies, but because it is a correct thing to do for ourselves. It's correct for our economy. We need to act decisively and boldly and restore confidence in our economy. But combating corruption is not the only measure. The steps that we have announced today are that a demonstration of the extensive measures we need to implement. At its policy conference, the African National Congress both reaffirmed the 15 action point adopted at its Polokwane conference, which included, among others, fighting corruption, and the 6 further action points adopted in Mangaung. So everywhere there is that commitment that we need to do all in our power. And I think the measures that government is taking in terms of SOE reforms, the shareholder management bill, streamlining the appointment of the boards of state-owned companies, costing their developmental mandate, implementing stringent measures to deal with the governance of state-owned companies, all of them are aimed at ensuring that we restore credibility in how our state-owned companies are managed. And I think it's quite an important step to take for us moving forward. Thank you. Should I just stand here?
Yeah, you can stand, Minister, and I'll just do this. You wanna do this?
In that case, I may have to answer each question as it comes.
I've been fired. So.
Just simplify. If you don't mind, let me start with. Oh, you already have the mic. Sorry, you can start.
And the rest of the panel. My first question is around what was the growth target while...
Start by introducing yourself. I know you are famous, but...
I know I'm not famous, Minister. My name is Monteo Khoripa from ENCA. Apologies for that. What was the growth target for the plan while you were putting it together, the exact number that you were looking at for South Africa's growth? And another one would be, you spoke about the disposal of non-core assets. How big is that going to be, and have you earmarked some of those assets that you can share with us?
You can give the ladies in front of you, since you wanted to start before ladies. So you can continue.
My name is Kelden Omo from ANN7. Minister, just wanted to ask you, the ANC in its recent policy conference, you all accepted that radical economic transformation is the way forward for the country, but we did not see that many private companies that participate, especially in one of the breakfast briefing where we saw Investec chair Stephen Kosev, he was one of the participants, not very keen in the transformation pace in order to speed up the transformation pace. So what steps are you taking as a finance minister to bring business on board? And do you think you should go the legislative route to ensure that that the private companies comply to that as suggested by the ANC's TG? Thank you.
Minister Slee from Jacaranda FM. I just wanted your thoughts on Oak Bay deregistering from the JSE. Do you think that will have any effect on the IDC? As well as in your 14-point plan, I didn't hear anything on maybe dealing with monopoly capital or white monopoly capital, as well as land reform. Thank you.
So, Arabile?
Good morning, Minister. Arabile Kumete, Bloomberg News. Just 2 points. One, you speak about the finalization of the CEO appointment for SAA, and that is happening this month. I'd like to jump the gun on that one and ask if, one, if there's a name that's been put forward, two, when exactly we make an announcement regarding that. And my second point is South Africa relies heavily on international flow of funds, and in that regard, have you made... have you had communication with international investors, the likes of the ratings agencies, before putting this plan together, or is it just a purely South African made plan?
Thank you. Can I take these four hands, and then I'll come to you. I'll come to the left wing. Let me deal with the right wing first, and ask if Minister Kwele would like to answer some of the questions, and give him the opportunity to do so if so. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that...
Excuse me. Thank you, Minister. Very briefly, on the issue of transformation of the economy, I think there is a general consensus that we should open up the economy. Where there are monopolies, we should put policies, or as a last step, we put then legislation. And that's why we, for instance, if we check in our sector, in the telecommunications sector, we had a policy which was open up access to spectrum, which is a lifeblood of the telecos, which are operating in South Africa. But the challenge is that we only got 6 licensees out of about 400 companies which are operating here. So that's why there was this open access network. But because we are facing extraordinary situation, we've been engaging with the industry as a whole, and that's why we came to the decision that, okay, while we have this open access network, and because the companies have been investing quite significantly in the telco industry, just in 1 year it jumped from 22 billion to 28 billion. So it's quite significant in view of increasing investment in the LTE networks, for instance, which are the 4G networks. Whether we still need all the spectrum to be allocated to open access wireless network. It was in that respect, through those engagement, continuous engagement with the industry, because we don't want them to stop investing while we're dealing with these key policy issues. I think it is in the same vein, whether you're talking of land, where there are concentration, whether you're talking about financial sector, is to set up clear policies which should be understood by everybody, and also have some flexibility enough to deal with the current and pressing issues which are facing the industry, so that they can continue to invest in our economy. As Minister Gigaba has said, the key element is to continue with growth. But that growth must be inclusive, because if we have got quite a number of people who are capable, who are not actually participating actively in the economy, so we are having a huge spare capacity which is not contributing enough. In South Africa, we have got a huge informal sector, which is not formally counted in our economy. The issues of financial inclusion, the minister is talking about, the reforms we're putting, is to try and make sure that the people who are operating their small businesses, they are part of the formal economy. So those are some of the things I just wanted to add. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Minister. Motheo, there isn't a new growth target for this action plan. We're still working on a 1.3 growth target, which we announced at the budget this year, taking into consideration the IMF's revision to downwards to 1. And depending on where you look at it, either they've revised our target downward to 1 or they revised theirs upward to 1 from 0.8. So there isn't a new growth target. And I think at the medium-term budget policy statement, having done our modeling with the South African Reserve Bank and Treasury and SARS, we will then make an announcement as to what is the target revision, whether we are maintaining the 1.3 target or we are also revising it up or downwards. But quite clearly, the economy is strained, and we need to brace ourselves for economic times ahead. And we must be quite clear and that we need to work quite hard, all of us together, to restore growth in the economy. The non-core assets, as we say in the statement, the non-core assets are going to be identified. We are going to do an audit of what should be regarded as non-core assets, both among as well as within the state-owned companies, so that we have an extensive discussion of that audit at the level of cabinet. Because you want, when you implement that program, not to solve one problem of strengthening the balance sheet of state-owned companies and the balance sheet of the country, but create social instability. So we need to have extensive consultation, but what we commit to as the National Treasury is that we're going to do an audit and have an audit done by March 2018, so that there could be a discussion in cabinet and a way forward provided. With regard to radical economic transformation, look, I was not making a policy statement. And so I wasn't going to talk about whether there is radical economic transformation or the debate whether whether RET is inclusive growth or whether they detract from one another. What we are just dealing with are certain action steps. And that's why it was important for me to start my presentation by indicating that we have engaged various stakeholders, the ratings agencies, domestic and international investors. We've listened to the issues they have said. We have detailed the issues emanating from the investors and the ratings agencies into these 14 action points, out of which we have developed this action plan. Whether, therefore, you will need, I mean, in the first instance, even at the level of the ruling party, the radical economic transformation is being discussed. But emanating from the policy conference is that you are talking about the structure, the systems, the patterns of ownership, as well as the management and control of the economy when we talk radical economic transformation. And therefore, nobody should have a fear that talk of radical economic transformation means either an implementation of reckless policies or a shift towards populist programs. But you are talking about steps you need to take in pursuit of inclusive growth. Because inclusive growth is not going to achieve itself. We all remain focused in that the ultimate goal of what we are trying to achieve is inclusive growth. But what are the instruments towards that inclusive growth? But that's not the issue we are discussing here. And how do you implement those instruments? Do you do it by way of legislation in order to force business? Do you do it by way of establishing developmental coalitions, strategic partnerships between business and government? Because one, it's important for government to have good relations with business, to build those relations. Because business is an important player in terms of driving growth and employment in the economy. Two, therefore, government must create an enabling environment for business to be able to thrive, to flourish, and to do the business of business for the benefit of the economy. That's an incentive. Three, government must implement, because I think there is already a number of policies available in the country, including the broad-based black economic empowerment policies, the amended regulations of the PPPFA, and the instruments that will be created by the public procurement policy, and others. The Black Industrialist Program that are aimed at actually providing leadership to business to implement transformation in their own space. And in our own space as government, we use the public procurement package, this ballpark figure of about 800 billion rand, in order to localize, to support the growth of the SMMEs, to intervene in a way that ends duality in the South African economy so that you can integrate what is regarded as the second economy, your informal economy, your informal townships, your rural areas, you integrate them into the mainstream economy and into the global value chains. So there are instruments available at government, and that's why the policy conference of the ruling party said that the relationship between government, reaffirmed the view that the relationship between government and business remains that of competition and contestation, where government uses incentives, but also uses the compulsive hand of government in order to enforce the implementation of certain transformative policies in the economy in order to drive transformation. So those debates continue about all of the issues that you were talking about. And I've made a statement earlier today that even as those debates continue, leading to December, I am aware that some of them are going they're going to continue creating uncertainty until they are finalized. But what I have asked for is that all of those involved in the debate should do so with cool and calm heads, bearing in mind the impact those debates have on the economy. I think Professor Stephen Friedman has raised an important point also about the importance of all stakeholders getting involved in these debates, because the issues of inclusion in terms of our economy must be important not only to the ruling party or to government, but are important to all the stakeholders. So those debates, as they continue, let us bear in mind the impact they have on the economy, and let us keep cool heads and not engage in such debates in a divisive and destructive manner that will drive fear and disunity. Because at the end of the day, South Africans need to unite behind the urgent steps we must take in order to expand our economy, the revenue base, and continue growing the South African economy in an inclusive manner. Arabile raises an important question about, SLE. The impact of the Oak Bay issue, we are going to consult with the IDC on that issue, because they would have a better sense of what needs to be taken into consideration. We ourselves haven't yet applied our minds to the issue, but we are going to consult with the IDC in that regard. And the Department of, sorry, not the IDC, I meant the Department of Economic Development. We're going to consult with them because they are the ministry in charge. And so, with regard to what you call WMC, I don't know why you are scared of, you being a journalist, why you are scared of calling it by its name. With regard to the debate about monopoly capital vis-a-vis white monopoly capital, the land reform program, what the ANC policy documents have said is that it has flagged those issues for finalization in December. And what I'm saying is the debate will continue. Let's all engage with very sober and calm minds. Bear in mind the impact the debates have on the economy, and look at the capacities of big business in South Africa and how those productive capacities can be harnessed for the benefit of the economy as a whole. And what role should government play? What leadership role should government play in developing developmental coalitions, in forging developmental coalitions with big business for the benefit of the economy? In all aspects of our economy, there are bold decisions we can take that can lead to drastic improvements in our economy, both in terms of growth as well as transformation. Arabile asks whether we have a name for the SAA CEO. I presume the board has made a submission, having followed the process. Having followed due process, they've made, okay, I'm not presuming, I know for a fact. Having followed due process, they have made a submission to me and stated their preferred candidate. I have applied my mind, prepared a cabinet memo, submitted the memo into the cabinet process. So the next cabinet meeting should finalize the matter, and we announce the name. And that's why we have set the deadline of July 2017 for that. It's important that this should happen in order to assure the lenders, the SAA lenders, that government is serious, that we take serious the loans they have given us, and we are not going to be reckless with regard to the loans they have given us and the responsibility to turn the airline around by appointing someone with good business grounding, with good business acumen, someone with turnaround expertise, who is going to help us achieve what SAA has failed to achieve over the last period of about a decade. So much has happened at SAA. So many CEOs have come and gone. None of them has stayed long enough to achieve what is possible. So many turnaround strategies have been developed. So much money has been invested into the airline in the form of guarantees and bailouts. A point must be reached when we no longer continue to give our public resources to the airline just to finance inefficiency, because that erodes public confidence in the airline and the decisions, the rationality of the decisions of government. We need to appoint a CEO with experience in managing companies of this size. And therefore, we will grab the bull by the horns and make of SAA what all South Africans wish it could be. At the end of the day, South Africans believe they should have an airline. We are on the southernmost tip of the African continent. We are far away from the transport hubs in the north of Africa, at that nexus between the north of Africa and Europe. And so we need to take serious the responsibility we have towards the airline. And so we've considered, we've applied our minds very well as to the submission that the board has made and the reasons why we should take the steps that we are recommending to Cabinet. The program that we're presenting today is not just it's drawn from our engagements with the ratings agencies, domestic and international investors, as well as the technical recession into which we entered during the first quarter of this year, it being the second consecutive quarter of a contraction. So we've heard the issues they have raised. We've applied our minds as to what we need to do in order to restore our investment grade over a period of time, to stave off any further downgrade and to reignite growth in the economy by boosting confidence and investments. So we had made a commitment, though they don't know the detail, but we have made a commitment that we would develop this action plan. We would then make it public so that everybody knows this is what we have committed to by which time. It may not be a perfect plan, but it's detailed enough to inspire confidence and demonstrate an action-oriented mindset and intervention on our part. Sure. Then let me go to the last round.
No, Warren. No, just those two hands, and then we'll speak to you guys on the sidelines.
And there's a third hand right there at the back. Fourth hand. Oops. Okay. Yeah, please continue.
Good day to the panel and my colleagues. My name is Mfona Kotoana from Reuters News. I wanted to ask Minister, a week or so ago, you said that we might have to seek outside financial help if the economy does not recover. were you referring to institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, and perhaps the BRICS Bank? And just what impact will the soft support for Eskom have on the expenditure ceiling? Thanks.
Janice Roberts from Money Marketing Media 24. Minister, these action plan deadlines you've mentioned, are they going to be effective because past deadlines on SOEs and the MPRDA weren't kept? And then this 1.3% was presented as a growth forecast, but now you've said it's a growth target. Could you please clarify?
There were two other hands right up there.
Thank you. Tabile Oka, economist at Argon Asset Management. Minister, when any economy goes through reform, what tends to happen is that GDP slows. So you seldom have or rarely have economic restructuring or reform at the same time as economic growth. And I see that according to our forecasts, we're expecting growth. Should we not be focusing on the implementation part of it and restructuring of the economy and less so on growth? And I say this because if we remember the growth targets set out in the NDP, the 5%, and we continue to hear this growth forecast being quoted, even though realistically we know that we are unable to achieve it at least in the next 5 years. So I just think that it's a dangerous precedent to have a growth target when we are going through economic reform, because typically you don't expand during a reform period.
Minister, that's not a journalist. So can we just really wrap it up? Colleagues,
that's the last question.
Minister, it's Thando Kubega from Eyewitness News. So my question has to do with the political noise that we're currently experiencing, particularly the fractions within the ruling party and calls for President Jacob Zuma to resign by members of your own organization. Do you think that this helps in instilling the business confidence that you're working towards?
Thank you very much. Monale will deal with two questions, and then I'll deal with the last two.
Yes. Should I?
Yes.
Okay. On growth target versus forecast, it is a forecast. I mean, it's really neither here nor there, right? When you put a number, that you believe is attainable, and in itself then becomes an aspirant target. And I think just to give it context, this is a number that we said we may achieve. This is at the time of the budget in February. I mean, a lot has happened since. I think one has to acknowledge that with the first quarter GDP numbers, it looks more likely that we may underperform the 1.3. So I think that now contextualize the conversation that we are having today on the urgency of having to find some measures that begin to at least path us on the way up. The point that Tabi is raising, I think, is spot on. I think globally, the minister just returned from the G20. Many countries are stuck in what has been a very low growth environment, and the appreciation has been that both fiscal and monetary policy have run out of room, and there's an appreciation that if we are to get ourselves out, you need some structural reform intervention, micro reform interventions broadly, and that becomes a way through which then you are able to release some of the bottlenecks within the economy. Unfortunately, you don't have the luxury of thinking that you can leave it to structural reforms, given that in themselves they take quite a bit of time to really kick in. You need a program that can also give some impetus for the economy in the much more immediate term. And I think that's where we bring in consideration for the economic support package as a means through which we're thinking that we may be able to give an injection and kickstart the economy in the more immediate term, and the structural reforms becomes now a much more medium-term, long-term program that gets us into a much more higher growth trajectory. And understanding very well that the two concepts are mutually inclusive and reinforcing. It will be very difficult to get much value out of an economic support package if your structural reforms are not in place and are not completed. So those have to essentially run concurrently.
Thank you very much. The question, Funego, you asked is, if we don't, the point, where is Funego? Oh, sorry, man, I'm still looking at the right wing. The point that I was making was that if we don't act with urgency, if we don't recognize that the economy needs all of our efforts and our united efforts, if we don't recognize that we need to act with urgency in order to restore growth in the economy. And I even added at the time that if the economic indicators in the foreseeable future continue to disappoint, we may find ourselves unable to meet our budget targets and having to seek assistance. Obviously, we're not there yet. But it is a stark warning. And that's why we're responding in this fashion and expect that we will all abide by the timelines we have agreed to. And the President has indicated to us that he is going to coordinate this action himself to ensure that we do what we have committed to doing and stick to the timelines that we have said we will stick to. A lot of detail needs to come out of the issues that we have raised in the coming months, but it's quite important that we take serious the state of our economy and the need to restore confidence and to get the economy going. I take into consideration the issues Tabile is raising. Ntavi is raising because we are not just growing, we're also restructuring. And that in itself has got an enormous impact on what we do and how we achieve the targets, and the targets we set ourselves and how we achieve those targets. But obviously, there is a number of things that we need to do, and we need to do urgently and do right in order to get the economy on a positive path. The ESCOM support, whatever we do now, must not and will not breach the budget ceiling. It must all be within the ceiling that we have set. Because if we breach it, we will be introducing a massive credibility crisis for the budget and for the country as a whole and the economy. So whatever is done will be within the budget ceiling. Will the deadlines be effective? Yes, they will. And we need to work very hard. The Treasury will play its part in monitoring this and providing assistance to the presidency in terms of monitoring. Both the Treasury and the Department for Performance Monitoring and Evaluation, so that we report timeously to Cabinet about the implementation of these programs, the compliance with the timelines we have set. It also does mean we need better collegiality. We need to develop and utilize and exploit the political capital of the Treasury in collegiate with our colleagues, so that we all work towards the same objective and understand the need to implement the programs that we have agreed to. South Africa is a democracy, and thank God we are a democracy. So that basically means, actually I must say I'm quoting the CEO of the JSE in this regard, before I'm accused of plagiarism. Thank God we are a democracy. It does mean that every 5 years we are going to have political noise, whether because the ruling party is going through its elective conference or because there are general elections. It's how we manage that political noise and the message that comes out of the economic actors. There are steps that we need to take in relation to colleagues in the cabinet in order to harmonize the public pronouncements, in order to develop a message and continue to raise consciousness about the need to stick to message. Because those with the responsibility of leadership must understand that responsibility and live up to the expectation. It may not be easy at times when the pressures of a public statement are there, when there are expectations from constituencies that you should speak in ways which they may like. But leadership is not a popularity contest. Leadership is a responsibility. That's why those upon whom it is entrusted must understand the full depth of the responsibility they bear on their shoulders. I may wish to be popular, but I understand I am the finance minister. I must never seek popularity at the expense of the economy. My words must forever not only be calculated, but be meant. I act not on my behalf, but on behalf of very many critical stakeholders, and people are watching what I say and are listening to it. And so all of us who are entrusted with leadership responsibility need to have that understanding. And I think we have a great job to do to harness those views, to harmonize the language, to standardize the message, and to ensure that those of us who speak on public platforms to the very best extent stick to message. There is, and it's not only about the statements and messages we make, it's also about forging relations. It's about maintaining close contact and engagement with business, with labor and other stakeholders, so that amidst all the noise, but we all know that this is what we are doing, this is how we are doing it, and we retain our singular focus on the task at hand. As I have said earlier, the National Treasury will remain singularly focused on the task of growing this economy and managing our fiscus. Thank you.